Welcome back to Romania, Donald.
Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for accepting for this interview. You have been 23 years with the Trump Organization, most of the time as Executive Vice President. Tell us a little bit about your journey in the organization and how it made you to be what you are today.
Well, for me, it started at the lowest rung. I think when I was in my early teenage year, my father sent me away during the summers, and I would work as a dock attendant at some of our casinos on the water. And from there, I went into landscaping and then construction and everything. And then, more of an executive role after I had done all of the hard jobs, all of the messy jobs, but actually learned how to build. So it was a long and steady educational process and continues to this day.
You built the organization practically from the inside. You have, though, also had a lot of, although you guys are in real estate, in entertainment, in all kinds of industries, you spoke in one of your books about the parallel economy. Mm-hmm. How does the parallel economy fit in the Trump Organization?
That's less so Trump Organization stuff. That's some of the stuff I do, business and investment on the outside of that. We've seen, obviously, in America with the political divide, you've seen a lot of, cancellations of perfectly good people who just happen to be conservative. You see that from the banking sector. You see that in the insurance side. And so I spent a lot of time with some pretty smart people who were watching what was happening in America. It reminded me a little bit of my early childhood growing up in the summers in communist Czechoslovakia, where I spoke the language fluently and I'd experienced it and been there and, really, enjoyed my time there, but certainly got a taste for, let's call it, bad political systems. And so I witnessed sort of what's going on in America for a long time. And, literally there's a component where, half the population has been sort of ostracized and left out to dry, and no one wanted to cater them. And I said, that's, probably 175 million people. There's probably a good business there.
Do you find that you have issues of parallel economy also with the entrepreneurs, the small businesses, the mid-size, or is it just the large corporations that are affected?
It's a little bit of everything, right? I mean, I've seen that. I've had businesses that I started myself, and there was a time not that long ago before we got into the political arena where, there wasn't a banker in New York I couldn't call, and there wasn't a loan I couldn't get, and all of a sudden that's gone. I've had businesses that we started, and I got a call, sometime last year, I got a call from one of my partners in small business, sort of a media news aggregation business so that everyone can see both sides of a story, not just the, let's call it the CNN version of the story, which is usually garbage, but it doesn't matter. People still believe it to be accurate. And so it's a news aggregation business, and I got a call from my partner, the operating account, which is, again, small business, but, $750,000, $750,000 in the operating account. He goes, it's just gone. I think we were hacked. I'm saying, we're hacked. We're a fairly large bank. It doesn't just get hacked, right? It's not start calling, finally get a hold of the bank. We forgot to tell you, we just don't want to do business with you anymore. There's a cashier's check in the mail. They didn't even call. They just sent a cashier's check with no notice, no nothing. It wasn't that we were doing anything wrong. We weren't creating propaganda or fake. We'll give you the New York Times, but we'll also give you the conservative side and let you make a decision on yourself. Apparently that was out of bounds, even in America, where the First Amendment and free speech are things that are still important to some, but clearly not in banking and otherwise. And so I think that was a sort of a great moment where you realize that something's very wrong in our system. And, if people are willing to step up and have the ability and knowledge how to, create deals, how to source them, how to finance them, how to build them, how to grow them, and for me, ultimately also, a platform to then promote it. That was very important, and I wanted to make sure that those people are never forgotten and not catered to.
You took your business into Turkey, into India, into the Philippines. How did you cross the boundaries of cultures? Yeah. And at the same time, did it have anything to do also with the way the leaders of that particular country, like Erdogan or Modi, were promoting or allowing businesses to grow in those countries? Did it have anything to do with that as well?
Less so. I mean, for us, before we got into this world, we built high-end luxury real estate, hotels, condominiums, and so it was really about finding markets that could sustain a level of luxury, right? If it was going to have the Trump brand on it, if it was going to have our name on it in perpetuity, We weren't just going to, pick any building and any, so it had to be great locations. And again, a lot of it had to do with sort of the evolution of some of those markets in luxury real estate where they were finally able to actually build to a level of quality, right? That, if you went to Mumbai 10 years ago, there was, 15 years ago, that didn't exist. In Dubai 15 years ago, that didn't exist. There was volume, but there was no quality. And you needed a little bit of both to justify sort of our brand. And so, now a lot of those markets have emerged. People have, become a lot more, well-traveled. They've experienced what, real estate in New York would look like, and they've started trying to develop that in their own markets. And so we spent a lot of time focusing on that. So, far less to do with sort of the political atmosphere of a country. Obviously, you need to be able to do business, and that's not always the case. But so we just avoid those markets where that's not going to happen. But it was more about the evolution of those markets being able to understand sort of luxury and being able to deliver a quality product that we would actually put our name on.
Having you here, I'm sorry, it's like the elephant in the room. Your name is Trump. There's no way that I'm not going to be talking about some issues of elections.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand. It's been a very hard-fought campaign. Mm-hmm. Your father worked very hard the last 2 years to fight against Joe Biden in the campaign. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden we have Kamala Harris. Now with the appearance of Kamala Harris, for me at least, it's been a question of how much is she an exponent of neo-Marxism? How much is she that hard left?
Well, she's the daughter of a Marxist professor, just so we're clear, right? I mean, I don't know if the saying holds in Romania, but, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
All over.
If you're the daughter of a Marxist professor, if you're rated the most leftist person in the United States Senate, left of even Bernie Sanders, which she was, if you're a career politician from San Francisco, there's a solid chance that you're a radical leftist. If you espouse all of the things that she's been talking about for her entire career, she's a leftist. This is what it is. That's not a thought. That's not a guess. They understand that's not that popular with the American public, and so the media in the U.S., big tech, the Democrats are trying to paint her as a moderate as though she doesn't have a record. But, again, the daughter of a Marxist professor is going to be probably a Marxist. That would be like me being my father's son and being soft. It's just not going to happen. That's not in the cards.
Agreed. Yet you have about 50%, more or less, of the American public that is, according to the polls, still leaning towards Kamala Harris. So the question is, how did the home of the brave get to the point where 50% of the population is supporting actually communism?
Well, propaganda. I mean, the reality is this: it's hard. It's hard to take a conservative stance in America. There are consequences to that. I understand that, and my father understands that probably better than anyone. They're actually shooting at him. That didn't just happen by accident. That didn't happen because someone didn't like him. That happened because for the last 9 years, they've been saying he's worse than Hitler. He is the greatest threat to democracy. They say these things each and every day. They say far worse. Eventually some radicals within the movement, which there's a lot more of them than you'd like to believe, do that. Notice how that story, that was a week ago, and it's like it never happened. Yep. He was actually shot in the face 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, and it's like that didn't actually happen. It's just gone. I have a feeling if that happened to a Democrat and it was done by a, red hat wearing MAGA Republican, it would be the only thing we hear about. The shooter the other day, a very active Democrat donor, someone who'd been featured multiple times in the New York Times and other, left-wing, propaganda. Someone who's, encouraging war in the Ukraine, and we're told that he's worth nothing, but he's been traveling to the Ukraine numerous times. I don't know how that happens. Most people who have nothing aren't able to vacation in Ukraine. It's an amazing thing, and it's like, it's almost as though it's a setup because, unless you're stupid, of course it was.
Yeah, you're talking about the shooting, which was probably a tragic moment, not only for the democracy, but I mean, imagine actually what it must have been for the family. How did you find out? How did the family react to it? How did you guys go through that moment, actually, of having your father, your children's grandfather, shot in the face in public? I mean,
No, it was not.
Pure video.
We've gotten, unfortunately, a little bit too used to some of this stuff, right? If they weren't able to take my father out politically, they tried to impeach him twice. If that doesn't work, they'll try to take his businesses. If that doesn't work, they'll try to jail him, and now they're shooting at him. So, unfortunately, that seems to have become the norm. Again, created entirely by, the left-wing, apparatus in America. For me, I found out that day, it was unusual. My 17-year-old daughter called me and she wanted to go fishing. I live on the water in Florida, so we got on the boat and go fishing because that never happens. So when your daughter calls you at 17 and wants to actually spend time with you, you say, "Who are you and what have you done with my daughter?" But you go anyway. So we were out on a boat and I got a call. Your father's been shot. And what now? There's only degrees of bad. Right? Sometimes you have a good call or a bad call. There's only degrees of bad, but there's still degrees within that. And the answer, no one knew. And so we were, pedal to the metal, back home, try to get in as quickly as possible. By then I'm seeing, some of the stuff on social media, but they'd shut down all communications. No cell phone in and out, no nothing. Got my father at a secure location in a hospital, and so I didn't know anything for 90 minutes, only that he had been shot. So hour and a half till I found out anything. By that time, I'd seen some of the stuff in social media, but you can be hit and come back and not, it's not like the movies where everyone dies instantly the second you're hit with a bullet, so you don't know. Still wasn't sure what was going on, and finally got a call. By then my whole family was there, and Kim and my ex-wife and my kids, and we're just sort of around, and they finally called, and on speakerphone, and again I'd seen the moment where he came back to find, and as soon as I knew he was okay, I was like, by the way, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen someone do. Right? These days online, coming back up, because online, everyone on a keyboard is a tough guy. Yeah. Right? Everyone's a real tough guy. The reality is most people aren't very tough. Yeah. Most people are weak. Everyone wants to think they're a tough guy, but maybe the internet has made them a little too comfortable. As I think Mike Tyson said, not getting punched in the face. So it's given people some liberty. But when you actually get shot in the face, that's a whole different thing. If you can come back from that, and you're tough in that instant, that's real. And that was the same leadership that kept us out of wars. That was the leadership that kept, a guy like Putin in check. That's what kept, Kim Jong-un, it kept him in check. The world was a safer place when my father was president because, even if you weren't sure how you were going to react under fire, I think all those world leaders understood he had resolve. They respected his, strength. Those who doubted it, I think, even those who may not like him, certainly came back and, witnessed what happened there on, July 13th. And, there's no questioning that strength anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And talking about that, the strength, let's talk a little bit about the strength of your opponent, or of your father's opponent, rather, where we have Kamala Harris has supported, she raised more money than ever, and they're supported by, if we're talking about families, you've got the Soros family, which is also Eastern European, right? And still gathering a lot of influence in Romania, a lot of influence in Moldova, a lot of influence in Ukraine. We haven't seen any conservative family actually creating the same kind of influence as the neo-Marxist ones have done.
I think that's right. I mean, the Democrat machine, they're good at fundraising. The policies have been a disaster. If you look at, the reality is this. Everyone's the media is pretending that, again, Kamala Harris started her political career 3 weeks ago, but there's a long history of failure in this administration. This is a unique election in the sense that it's one of the only elections that I'm aware of where people who are voting have all actually had a chance to live under both parties, right? Let's not forget, Kamala Harris is the vice president today. She's been the number 2 person in the U.S. government for the last 4 years. She has pushed the policies that have given us the inflation, that has given us the wars, that have given us the failure at the border, that has created 100,000 annual deaths due to fentanyl by her lack of leadership and unwillingness to do anything there. And so everyone has experienced life under both. And it's a simple question, is when were you better off? There's not a reasonable individual in the world that thinks the world or America is in a better, safer, or more prosperous place. We went from a time of peace to a time of war. We went from a time of prosperity to a time of poverty. We went from a time where crime was in check and lower income earners were actually going into the opposite. Well, now they bail out the criminals or release them. In California, you can go steal almost $1,000 from a store and not even be prosecuted. You can do it every day. Crushing small business.
California, where Kamala Harris was.
Well, Kamala Harris, where she was a prosecutor.
Yeah.
I think she tried 4 cases. So I know this because my fiance was actually a prosecutor in the same office. And so, the media will tell you whatever they need to tell you to get her to win. They have chosen that leftist path, so they don't just have the billions coming in from, a Soros, but they have $1 trillion of free publicity from the mainstream media, who have just decided to, be the marketing arm of the Democrat Party. They have $1 trillion from big tech, who's doing the same. But on the ground, as someone who spends a lot of time on the ground, the real people, the people of America, the people that we're fighting for, they get it, they see it, because. If I go to McDonald's with my kids and Donald Trump Jr. says, whoa, that's expensive. If I have sticker shock, the world has sticker shock.
Right.
And people, I think, are going to vote accordingly.
Being in Romania, I feel I have to ask you, you're half Eastern European.
I am.
Your mother was Czech. You grew up even a period in the Czech Republic. You speak the language.
I do.
How did that create a different kind of a Donald Trump Jr. than if you would have been just 100% American? Did that give you an extra something
100%.
in your way of being, in your business acumen, in your style?
Well, I think certainly in style, in America, there's sort of, Eastern European culture, maybe like Latin culture, there's still a little bit of a macho factor. Like, it's okay to be a man if you're a man. Like, I understand in America that's forbidden, right? It's okay to be a woman if you're a man, but you can't be a man. It's crazy what's going on in the world. Frankly, that's happening in many parts of Europe. I mean, Eastern Europe, still has some of that. So growing up in that culture, seeing it from my grandfather, who was a great athlete and a strong guy, and I think it certainly imparted, a different mentality for me, where I appreciated those things very much. I think it was also, from a life perspective, I think it was an important lesson, because I went from the 70th floor, of Trump Tower to 2 months every summer in what was then communist Czechoslovakia, in Zlín, a small town, sort of 3.5 hours east of Prague, living in old communist housing, and it was a culture shock for certain, but it also made me appreciate what we have.
Did you get to stand in line for bread?
I did. I've waited in the bread lines. I can assure you, they are not nearly as glamorous as the American politicians who are pushing for socialism and these days just outright communism would have you believe. And it's sort of interesting. You never see people who escaped, the Iron Curtain actually advocate for those systems. It's only those who believe it will be different this time, because it's never different. Yeah. It always fails. But so, that was an important part. And honestly, I think it was probably the beginning of my political leanings, right? My first sort of memory of fear was one of the first times I'd been over there. I was like 5 years old. And, still blonde at the time, had a bowl cut, and, I was wearing a 1980s sort of American jean jacket with the stars and stripes on it. And I was 5. Pulled out of line at customs by a soldier in a very drab sort of, communist-era suit with an AK-47 slung over his shoulder. Am I there to spread the propaganda? Now, I spoke fluent Czech, but I didn't know what propaganda was because I was 5. I didn't know what it meant in English either. It wasn't lack of communication. I was 5. What do you mean? Like, I had no idea. But obviously a very intimidating moment. And I think it was at that moment where I started realizing that the system, was not for me. And I'll fight accordingly. I remember there was a sort of a great picture in the little, sort of one-bedroom apartment that my grandparents lived in that we stayed in Zlín. And it was the photo of my parents' wedding. And I remember looking at the photo, I'm saying, it's odd, why is it missing my grandmother? She wasn't in the picture. My grandfather was there, and, well, they wouldn't let her leave the country to go to her daughter's wedding because they understood she probably wasn't coming back if they left. The only way to get her back was to get my grandfather back, at least, was to keep one of them there. And I said, that's odd. Imagine a system like that where they won't let you leave because they know you're not coming back. It's probably not a winning thing. So, strangely enough, again, I grew up the son of a billionaire from Manhattan. I'm supposed to be, a radical leftist. I went to an Ivy League school. I'm supposed to be basically borderline communist these days. But I'm a strong conservative fighter because, again, I've actually lived under those systems, and I've seen they're not so great.
And a lot of the Eastern European are the same way. They're also fierce conservatives because of that,
Yeah.
because of the heritage. But I have to also ask, you're the second time in Romania. The last time you came hunting,
Yep.
boar, deer.
Yep.
We have a lot of bears. Are we going to see you in Romania for a bear hunt?
I don't know.
A real bear hunt?
I think probably not. Even if I ever did, no one would ever hear about it because that's one of those things that becomes forbidden to speak about. But yeah, no, I had a great time here. I think it was 17, 18. I brought my son, sort of his first sort of international hunting trip. We had a blast. It was great. Boar hunting and just I loved it. Loved the people. And again, I understand Eastern European because I am Eastern European. It's,
Absolutely. I have to just one question about Ukraine because at this point I think we need to look at what is happening. Zelensky is today in New York. He's visited an arms factory there.
Of course
he is going to be at the General Assembly. He went to present or wants to present to Biden not a peace plan but a victory plan. He actually called it a victory plan. What is the future? Is there a chance to have peace? Because I know your father said that
my
if
father's
he
the
is
only
going
one
to be
that can get
elected
peace.
between the day of election and the day of taking office, he will finish the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, the way that starts is we stop sending unlimited funds. This war would have been over 2 years ago if the U.S. wasn't fighting a proxy war with Russia for no reason. I function at a fairly high level of politics in the United States. I know everyone, and there are exactly 0 people that I've spoken to that have articulated to me what victory actually looks like. When I see the news in the U.S., there was a Russian Jeep that got a flat tire. It's a major victory. Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, he withdrew from a third of the country, but it was a strategic withdrawal, so it's different. That's like a win, even if it's a withdrawal. I mean, it's such propaganda. It's insane. And all that's happening right now, right? It's not the guys that Putin has, the oligarch son from Moscow that is dying, or the rich guy in Kiev that's dying. It's someone that both sides view as the peasants. They'll send them to go die as cannon fodder, probably 1 million deaths, an entire generation wiped out. And again, not one person in America. And we've put $250 billion into it, so you would think by now we'd actually know what victory looks like, and no one even knows. The war only stops when there's a threat of the funds disappearing. Right now, everyone in Ukraine, the ministry, they're not going to war. They're not on the front lines exactly. They sit back and they buy their houses in the south of France, and they're stealing half of the money, and everyone knows what's going on. Because we got to remember, Zelensky replaced sort of Fauci as the deity of the left, right? They don't believe in God, so they believe in other things. Before that, it was Greta Thunberg as the high priestess of climate change. It went to Fauci. He wasn't right about anything since 1984, but minor details. And it became Zelensky. What we've got to remember is that Ukraine was the most corrupt country, maybe in the world. It was rated more corrupt than Russia prior to, again, him being the deity of today's left. Whatever's going on is disgusting. The Pentagon lost another $250 billion. I'm sure it was probably spent there. They lost that. If I spend $601 on Venmo, the IRS will audit me. The Pentagon can lose $260 billion. Billion, not billion. Billion. It's like, so let's say we're in for $500 billion. What could possibly go wrong? Again, it only stops if you have someone that's competent in there. Okay, a guy like Putin, honestly, he's done well with this war for himself and for Russia because we put stupid sanctions on the oil. Oil prices go through the roof. He takes the margin, the delta. He funds his war effort, and he builds up his entire manufacturing base in all of Russia. Their economy is booming because of it. Now, they're making arms instead of computers. It's different. They're not. But before, all they had was oil. They've become allies with Saudi. They've eliminating possibly the petrodollar. That's not going to be great for America when we borrow the insane amount of money that we borrow. Now, maybe it's good because we'll stop funding, transgender surgeries in Pakistan for the tune of $25 million, which also being stolen money. But, the amount of grift and waste funded by the U.S. taxpayer just going to garbage. Our entire economy destroyed. The $1 trillion in debt. Now, just the interest payment for the first time in history. $1 trillion. I'd say that's a few Romanias, in terms of GDP. That's just our debt.
Billion. A million.
I mean, think about that. Just the interest We borrow money from China, right? And then we give them money in aid for free, like they need it. I mean, while they're taking over the world and, sending fentanyl across our border industry. We live in crazy times. Common sense is not so common. So many of the decision makers that we have in politics, they're making trillion-dollar decisions, but they have no understanding of finance. The bureaucrats who've never signed the front of a paycheck, only the back, are making decisions that they can't comprehend or understand. There was a reason my father had the successes he had. There was a reason you had the backlash from the deep state, because they saw their power slipping away. The military-industrial complex and the generals, they don't want to end this war because they're saying, hey, my board seat at Raytheon is dependent on, we got to make sure we're sending missiles. I mean, if we're not selling missiles, we don't get the board seat. That's their retirement plan.
Yeah.
So they want war. And now we want to extend long-range missiles that are capable of striking into Russia, made by Americans, probably operated by Americans. They won't tell us that, but, in all fairness, I'm sure the CIA is doing all of this stuff anyway. What could go wrong? Russia has what? 6,348 intercontinental nuclear bullets, more than the U.S. by like 1,000. Like, I mean, 2 or 3 is all it takes to, have let's call it an actual global warming crisis. Like that's like global warming, like where you go to like 1,000 degrees in about a billionth of a second, and things don't ever really come back. That's actual global warming, and that's what we're trying to prevent. But the people who are making decisions, they have no incentive to do that. The people who are advising them are on the payroll of the people who are getting rich from the war. It's absolutely disgusting, and all I see there right now is genocide. And they're okay with that. Just, again, whether it's Putin, sending guys from Siberia who aren't anywhere near Moscow or St. Petersburg, today he doesn't care. Zelensky's the same way. You see some of the videos, you guys getting dragged out of their car. You must go die for no reason. In a war you can't win. Against technology you can't fight any against. With a rifle that doesn't work. Just go stand there and die. You should do that because, for what? It's nuts.
Yeah. Before we conclude, what would your message be to Romania, to the Romanian public? Romania TV is a conservative TV station. We are the #1 news station in this country. What would your message be to the public?
Well, listen, I understand everything I'm saying about this is, it's not even going to be all that popular, even amongst the conservatives in Romania, and I understand where you stand, but, again, I don't think there's an intelligent person that I've spoken to in the United States, whether it's from an intelligence background, the ones that will talk to me or that are conservative, Putin's not exactly had an overperformance, right? I think it's been a drastic underperformance. I think he totally probably missed the mark on that one. I think, the world's view of, Russia's sort of incredible standing army are maybe not so incredible anymore. But, I understand it's not the most popular opinion, even here, but, he's not going past Ukraine no matter what. I mean, that would actually welcome NATO. Now, the U.S. gave him every excuse he needed to invade by saying, hey, we're going to take this entire country that's, let's call it 1,000 miles buffer zone that stood for 60 years, and we're going to put NATO right on your front lines. I mean, we provoked him, probably because, I guess, we haven't been at war in 2 or 3 years, so we got to keep that machine going. So we gave him every excuse, but, I think the fear, obviously, here in Europe is that he's going to keep going, but that ain't happening. But we start sending missiles into Russia on a guy like Putin with that Eastern European sort of macho thing, and he loses face on the world stage. That, to me, is much scarier. And so, I think my father's the only guy that can get peace, and, that peace is really, it's not about peace, it's not about geopolitics, it's about stopping the unnecessary death of an entire generation, of Eastern European men. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Donald, for this interview.
Thank you very much.
It was great to hear your insight. Thank you.